Trump's tariffs. Oliver, over to you. The floor is yours. I know that all our listeners are going to be gagging to hear your thoughts.
Where do we begin? I mean, the Times did some very good analysis midweek, saying this was pretty crude algorithm he created to work out what tariffs would be. I think the quote from one economist they spoke to was, "This wouldn't pass a basic economics exam," the way it was done. And there's some really striking things in there. That the poor country of Lesotho, landlocked African country, being charged 50% tariffs. And that's purely on the basis that Lesotho exports quite a bit of denim and diamonds to the US, about $240 million worth last year. Doesn't import very much because per capita income's tiny. It's sort of $970 a year per capita income. So the import's very low. There's a big sort of gap as a result. And
they've also had that's the place where the Prince Harry charity is as well, and they've had a feel for that country right now.
Yeah, between Harry and Trump, there's
Centre Bally and Trump.
A pincer movement.
Yeah.
So there are plenty of very strange results like that. The UK, as we know, escaped relatively unscathed or lowly scathed with 10% tariffs, but the EU gets 20, China gets 34 on top of what it already has.
We also still have 25% as well, though, on steel and cars.
So we do.
I mean, it's not exactly
specific
it's
sectors.
Not exactly kind of get the bunting out, is it?
No, and Trump, I think, came out with some remarks to the fact that the UK was very pleased with the result it got, which I think has been corrected by the government, and we will see where that goes to. I mean, the problem is, trade deals take a long time to negotiate at the best of times. I think the Canada trade deal took 7 years, and that's it's a Commonwealth country. The idea that we could get a deal done with the US anytime soon, given the US's traditional huge demands on agriculture, chicken, beef, is for the birds, I think.
And also, as some of my listeners have been pointing out, Canada and Mexico had trade deals with the US. It didn't stop them from getting slapped with big tariffs either.
Yeah, Trump is tearing up deals left, right and centre, isn't he? And riding roughshod over existing agreements to do this.
And what's the mood from the sort of senior business figures that you've been speaking to?
There's a degree of resignation, degree of getting on with it. We've been through so much disruption in recent years, COVID, Brexit, inflation, that people see this as yet another big bit of macro volatility to deal with. I think people recognise, in general, reshoring to the US or moving production to the US is not going to be viable. I know some companies like Apple have made a big play of talking about it, and Apple did that in the first Trump presidency too, didn't they? I think the hope being that if you do something symbolic, you can then get opt-outs or special treatment on other tariffs, because Apple obviously makes a huge amount of stuff in China, which should be whacked very heavily by these new tariffs. So I think people recognise it's not viable to move a lot of manufacturing to the US anytime soon. And there's certain industries like shipbuilding where you haven't got the skills or the infrastructure to suddenly start building huge container ships. So there's lots of things where people are going to have to try and ride it out and just hope Democrats come in next time and Trump goes and the tariffs go, or the tariffs get dropped before Trump goes, because the economic pain inflicted on the US is too great to bear.
I mean, that's a lot of hoping, isn't it? That's a lot of... But as Kim Darroch reminded us, and we actually played a clip at the start of the show of Donald Trump back, I think he was speaking to talk show host Larry, what's his name, I can't remember, in 1988, and he was adamant that tariffs were the way forward and that America was being ripped off. So this is an ideology that he has held very, very passionately and close to his heart for like almost 40 years now. It doesn't feel like he's just going to give these up very easily.
And he seems to have surrounded himself with people who agree with this, doesn't he? He's created a chamber of people who subscribe to this, or at least pretend to. And you're right, if you just switch Japan, which you talked about a lot in the 80s, for China now, you've got a pretty identical analysis of what's going on with the US. But it's amazing that he inherited a country growing at 3% plus GDP-wise.
Wow.
Pretty full employment, markets rising.
Wow.
Lots of optimism around tech, and that's all been smashed. The market has been smashed. I think $6 trillion plus wiped off US equities in the past couple of weeks. So it's a question as to whether he can endure the pain, I think. I mean, Jerry Baker, the former Wall Street Journal editor, who is fair to say is on the right of politics pretty firmly, did a column in the Times where he was saying, can Americans endure this trial of pain, because that's what it's going to be. It's going to be a lot of Americans are invested in the stock market via their 401k accounts. So lots of American voters feel share prices in the way they don't in the UK. And then you think about...
Just on that, just hold that thought, because one of our listeners has messaged in a couple of times about this, and he says, "Hi Aisha, it seems that many people are conflating share value falls with employment prospects. Shareholders, who are in general wealthy people, and pension funds do not contribute to the manufacturing process. All they actually do is push up the price to end users because shareholders take a profit for nothing other than a part of their investment. A falling share price does not affect the efficiency, capability, or even profitability of the company concerned." What would you say to that? So this person's making an argument going, we're all panicking over shares because it's only rich people affected by shares. Is that true?
Well, it's right to say it's not directly causal. Share price can fall and then bounce back. These things move around a lot, and share price falling doesn't necessarily mean a company's going to do worse. It can recover, but they are linked. A share price is the market's expression of how a company's going to do. So a share price reflects what people think is going to happen. And if share prices fall, that's because people think companies are going to have a harder time. They're going to make lower profits in the future. They're going to invest less. And also when share prices are lower, companies can't do deals with their shares. They can't use their shares as currency to do M&A mergers in the same way they can do when shares are higher. So it's wrong to say there's no crossover into the real economy. And to the point about it's only rich people, well, in the US, there's much more democratized share ownership via 401k savings plans. Many more people own shares, especially the Magnificent Seven, the big tech companies, which should be particularly whacked.
And I presume people here will also potentially be affected because lots of people with pensions, they're invested in kind of American stocks and things. Yeah,
it's ruined my ISA. I was up nicely until this went on, and I've taken a big whack. Luckily, I had a bit of footsie in there, being patriotic, so I've got a nice spread.
I don't even dare look. I'm just hoping kind of blissful sort of ignorance. And look, this other thing I wanted to ask you was, it does feel that what Trump is wanting to do, as is the case in lots of things in his ideology, is almost turn the clock back to sort of an old, I don't know, kind of 1950s, post-war, 1960s, old school, heavy industry, heavy manufacturing, everything being onshored again. I mean, and look, many of my listeners might look back with nostalgia at that time. I get it. But is that even possible? Because hasn't the world moved on? I remember at one point, actually, when I was a young thing working at the DTI, the industrial strategy was, look, the world is moving on. It's not in... If you're a kind of a progressive, smart Western country like the UK, you don't want to be manufacturing flimsy T-shirts, paying your workers no money, kind of £1.50 a T-shirt. You want to be building an economy which is based on higher value things, skills, the technologies of the future. Is he wanting to move to a world where everyone goes back to kind of manufacturing in their own territory, even though that means sort of going lower skilled jobs and low wages and things like that?
Yeah, this zero-sum mercantilist view of the world sort of faded away with the end of the 19th century. And, all the multilateral agreements, multilateral trading arrangements that evolved in the 20th century replaced that, and the world got very wealthy on the back of it. And, America has these big gaps in trading balances with countries, as you say, because it's moved up the value chain over the years. It no longer makes the basic widgets or the basic denim that you can get sourced more cheaply elsewhere. I think the average manufacturing wage in the US is about $100,000 a year, including benefits.
Wow.
So it's not economic to make a lot of this stuff in the US. And the US also, the dollar is the world's reserve currency, so the US needs other countries to buy stuff in dollars. It's partly how it works.
And look, what does Keir Starmer do now?
Nothing in the short term. He has indicated he's going to sit there and wait it out, hasn't he? And I think that's in that 10% tariff. Do you want to contribute to a trade war based on that? I think he can try and lean or negotiate with the US where he can. They can try and work on some sort of bigger trade deal, though. As I said, I think it's quite unlikely there'll be a proper free trade deal given the US's asks. And then I think he's got to try and sort of defend free trade and do more of it with the EU, Japan, South Korea, other countries. I think what Trump's going to do is cohere the rest of the world, actually. He's going to unite big other trading blocs like the EU with countries like Canada, Mexico, the UK.
That's interesting. I mean, that's the argument that Lord O'Neill, Jim O'Neill's been making, saying, look, this is an opportunity for the rest of the world to kind of come together and really sort of fight back but form their own trading bloc. But then, interestingly, I spoke with Jeremy Hunt yesterday, who, I mean, he was slightly nervous about that argument. He wrote in the Telegraph yesterday that we should look at Singapore, and actually, as Trump erects trade barriers, we should literally become the country that is absolutely open trade, free trade. We should become the opposite to attract people.
There's something in that, isn't there? I mean, I think that the movement of people's important. I think attracting talent's going to be important, and the non-dom stuff is negative in that regard, because you can see people are going to start leaving the US at the margins. You know, academics, scientists, business people are going to feel uncomfortable with the rule of law being undermined in the way it is. And I think, you know, trying to trade more freely around the world is going to be a good thing, and the UK needs to do that and always has done that. I think where the Singapore thing falls down a bit is, you know, the UK public would never tolerate the sort of social contract you have in Singapore, where you have very low taxes and very
no welfare,
thinly funded public services.
Yeah. A couple of questions from our listeners. Jan says, is Trump's own wealth not going to be affected by all of this?
It depends how much he has invested in the stock market. I mean, he's been a property guy traditionally, hasn't he? And you would guess, I don't know, he would have a lot in property and cash and what have you. But definitely people around him will be affected. I mean, look at Elon Musk. You know, Tesla's value has been smashed in the past few months.
Another question, again, this is about pensions. People are really worried about pensions. Can we talk about what this means for our pensions?
In the short term, it's not good, but I think it will eventually recover. I don't think you can sustain this kind of regime for very long. I think it's going to start hurting the US too much.
And I suppose, look, where is this just a new chapter of history? Is there any sort of, we just wake up and it was a bad dream and like Bobby's in the shower sort of kind of thing like that? Or is the world changed forever now?
I suspect this won't last. I think it will cause so much pain in the US that Trump will either change course or be voted out next time around. I don't think he can carry on with this because, I mean, the potential gains are eventually more manufacturing coming back to the US. That's, you know, a 20-year project, if it ever happens at all. Plus, as you say, the economics won't add up on many, many products and many job lines. So I don't think that's going to happen.
Gosh. I mean, it is extraordinary, isn't it? It is. I mean, I was just saying in the introduction to my show yesterday, I mean, it's 7 weeks ago, this time 7 weeks ago, we just had the security conference at Munich, you know, which was like a huge moment in terms of the kind of post-war consensus being ripped up, and now on defence, and now the post-war consensus on trade being ripped up. I mean, it's not even been 8 weeks.
We should say all this is what Trump said he was going to do, isn't it? And there shouldn't be a surprise here. And the formulation many clever, affluent people on Wall Street used before the election was, you know, take him seriously, not literally. There's plenty of remorse going on, I think, around
I know.
share prices
Pete
and the business
says
environment.
Trump's going nowhere in 4 years. He'll change the Constitution and stay. Look what happened the last time he lost.
I mean, there's a theory, the sort of Medvedev deal with J.D. Vance, isn't there? That could be done, so we will see.
Well, happy times. Jazz hands, everybody.
Plenty to talk about.
Plenty to talk about. Just don't look at your pensions or your ISA. That's the strong takeaway from Oliver Shah. Oliver, an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. And do make sure you read Oliver's column tomorrow in the Sunday Times, and do catch up with the business pages of the Sunday Times. It's going to be really interesting to see what stories they've got as a result of the tariffs.